I want to jump really quick to our special guest who's on the line. Joining us now to talk about all of this latest breaking news involving the FBI is Senator Bill Cassidy from the great state of Florida. Senator, welcome to the program.
Well, great, but I'm from the great state of
Oh,
Louisiana, not of
you know
Florida. So
what?
anyway, glad to
I
be with you.
I was just reading about Marco Rubio, so that's exactly why I said that. I know that you're from Louisiana. My grandparents are from Louisiana. I have tons of family down there. But I want to first just get your reaction on the FBI admitting yesterday that it failed to act on a tip about the Florida gunman Nicholas Cruz. What happened there?
Yeah, we've had systems in place that need to prevent tragedies like this. Let's just start off. We all feel for those families, for the community. The bell tolls for us all, if you will. But we have these systems. We're seeing the systems break down, and that can't happen. We saw it break down in Texas, where the Air Force had a history of this shooter at the church in Texas, a history of domestic abuse. They didn't report it. Similarly, we have a system where the FBI should follow up these sorts of red flags, and they did not. We need to investigate. We need to correct. We need to prevent.
So the reason why I said Florida is your colleague, Senator Marco Rubio, he slammed the FBI's failure, calling it, quote, inexcusable. And Florida Governor Rick Scott has also responded, calling for FBI Director Christopher Wray to resign. Should the FBI director step down?
So the FBI director has not been on the job that long, but someone should be held accountable. If there's a training accident and a Navy sailor dies, it isn't the head of the Navy who steps down. It is the general or the admiral most directly in charge who steps down. And whoever was most directly in charge should be held accountable.
Does the FBI's failure in Florida cast a shadow, in your opinion, on its ongoing Russia collusion investigation?
Those are different departments within the FBI. Again, if we go to a Department of Defense analogy, if there's a training accident with deaths off the coast of Japan or China, then the admiral most directly in charge is held accountable. That does not necessarily cast doubts upon naval operations in the Mediterranean. So we have to kind of segment who is accountable and frankly hold them all accountable.
Again, folks, if you're joining us now, we're talking with Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Senator, there's been some calls for gun control. Is that the conversation that we need to be having now?
I'm never quite sure what people mean by gun control. If they mean making sure that the mentally ill or those folks who are prone to danger, don't get weapons, absolutely. That's already the law. We need to implement it. If they mean confiscation of weapons from law-abiding citizens, that is another issue. I need them to define what they are speaking of.
We're living in an era in which there's often calls for congressional hearings. Would you support a congressional hearing to look into what happened in Florida?
Absolutely. Here we have the FBI, not with subtle findings, but with horrible findings of a young man who the police have been called on 39 different occasions, posting YouTube videos, someone within a month or even sooner reporting to the FBI that he was prone to danger, fellow students at the school identifying him as someone who was incredibly troubled, and it wasn't followed up on. Mm-hmm. Why not? And how systemic is that issue? I think that's something Congress should be interested in.
Right. So another big story yesterday was this indictment of 13 Russian nationals for election interference, as well as this finding from Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. Let's go ahead and take a listen to this clip.
Now, there is no allegation in this indictment that any American was a knowing participant in this illegal activity. There is no allegation in the indictment that the charged conduct altered the outcome of the 2016 election.
So, Senator, no allegation that any American was a knowing participant, no allegation that any charged conduct altered the outcome of the election. These special counsel findings so far of course, so far is the key word, have not lived up to the hype that Trump or his campaign colluded with Russia to affect the election. Senator, you said a while back that you'd be willing to give Mueller another shot to restore credibility to his investigation. Is this it?
I think this begins to restore credibility. I think that it's consistent with what we've known, that the Russians have a hope and a desire to spread discord in our society, to make Americans hate Americans. We've seen a pattern of this. And so to the degree that the Mueller is finding this out, it's objective, and it doesn't reflect text messages between two FBI agents who hate Trump. I think that does begin to restore credibility, but obviously the investigation is not over. But still, this is a better sign.
Mm-hmm. So I was reading an article from the New York Times from back in 2015 involving this Internet Research Agency, which of course is the group, this Russian group that was involved in yesterday's indictment. It looks like they were actually responsible for a disturbing fake news incident in Louisiana in your St. Mary parish. Do you know anything about this?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the article. I remember at the time thinking, this is kind of weird.
Right. Kind of weird.
Yeah. For those folks who are not aware of it, this Russian troll organization planted fake news about an explosion at a petrochemical refinery plant, if you will, in Louisiana, and had had real calls going out to people regarding the incident with fake newscasts. So they are just trying to sow discord. I think the most recent reports is that they have staged rallies trying to get African Americans upset with the process, in which they would pay people to show up. So this is actually a modern version of what they used to do way back when, where they would start riots in soccer stadiums in London. So we just have to be aware of it, and ideally we'll make them pay a price.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So where do we go from here? What are our next steps? I mean, these Russians, from what I've read, are not even in the United States right now, or there's no indication that they are. What can be done to actually go after these people?
For social media, the social media giants have to be aware. They have to be a little bit more accountable than they've been. I would say that's number one. Number two, we in America, we in the United States have to be a little bit more skeptical when we hear different things. For example, there's a Wired magazine report yesterday that Russian bots went on Twitter immediately after the Florida shootings to talk about gun control and issues such as that. So we just have to have a little bit of skepticism when we read a Facebook post encouraging people to shoot fellow Americans. We just have to have skepticism about that.
Right.
To the degree that FBI thinks that these trolls are backed by the Putin government, obviously there's things that we can do to make them pay a price in the Soviet Union, in Russia, and so therefore we should do that. I mean, there has to be a price to pay domestically for them if they wish to sow discord in the United States.
Right, right. So I want to switch topics just a little bit. You and Senator Lindsey Graham have spearheaded an effort to repeal and replace Obamacare with a federalism plan that involves control of health care from the federal government back to the states. Where does that stand in 2018 this year?
It really depends upon where that stands. In some way, is dependent upon circumstances. Mm-hmm. Right now, there are people in Louisiana who are paying $40,000 a year for their health insurance premiums. $40,000 a year. There are states across the nation who cannot afford their Medicaid program, their Medicaid expansion program, for example, Oregon, that just passed new taxes, not upon labor union insurance plans, but upon small business insurance plans, upon individuals, making them pay more to finance the state's portion of the Medicaid expansion. Now, if people in Congress care about that, then we're going to operate on it. We're going to come up with a solution. And Graham Cassidy is a solution that deserves looks not just by Republicans, but by Democrats as well. If Congress decides to ignore that, then we won't have an opportunity. But let me say, even advocates of Obamacare, like Andy Slavitz and Melanie Bella, Tom Daschle, Democrats who either worked on Obamacare or were advocates for it, now admit there's a problem and they're calling for change. So hopefully the advocates admitting there's a problem, calling for change, will give an opportunity for Graham Cassidy to bring relief to individuals and to states.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And you talked about this just a little bit now, but I mean, you're a doctor, so in addition to being a senator, of course, but can you explain a little bit more, like for people, why Obamacare is not good for our healthcare system and why it needs to be repealed and replaced?
Yeah, so there's different aspects of it, and frankly, some of it's already been repealed. The individual mandate.
Absolutely,
Americans hate the fact that the federal government is telling them what to do and will penalize them to buy insurance if they don't buy insurance that they cannot afford. Americans hate that. That has been repealed. That is a good thing. Other aspects of Obamacare have been repealed since President Trump took office. But on the other hand, let's just talk about the individual market, where it used to be if you were a middle-class American working hard, you could afford insurance. Now, you might be paying $40,000 a year. That is not good. If you're in the small group market, since Obamacare passed, most likely you've seen your deductibles and your copays increase into the thousands. That used not to be the case. Indeed, if you look under Obamacare at for-profit hospitals, insurance companies, and at the pharmaceutical industry, since Obamacare passed, their stock market value has skyrocketed. Well, who's paying for that increased value of those companies? It is the taxpayer and it is the premium payer. Now, we're paying far more, as their, under Obamacare, valuation dramatically increases. Something's wrong with that equation. It is not sustainable. Taxpayers and individuals can't afford to continue to pay more and more and more for these companies to become more valuable. We've got to put power back in the hands of the patient.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Now, on the topic of tax cuts, what are your thoughts on how it seems like the more people learn about the Trump tax cuts, the more they like about it?
Yeah, it's giving power to the
Isn't that kind of funny?
Yeah, totally. Because the left kept on knocking it, but once folks look at their paycheck, they see more money. Hey, they kind of like it, don't they?
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a really positive thing. I think we'll see more of it, and I anticipate the economy beginning to improve, and continue to improve, and as it does, and people make more money, they'll like it even more.
What have you seen from your colleagues? It seems like now that the Democrats are seeing the positive results of these tax cuts, they're sort of scrambling as Republicans like yourself are gaining steam.
Yeah, some are doubling down. Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi.
The crumbs, right?
Yeah, they're so out of touch with the average working family. They still complain about it. But others have just started. They want to change the topic.
Mm-hmm.
They want to make it something different. But as one Democrat told me the other night, if all Republicans do is remind folks that they have more money and the economy is doing better, that's probably the best thing we can do for the midterm elections.
Another topic that is close to my heart, the national debt. It's out of control, Senator. Our Director of National Intelligence, Dan Cote, I think he testified this past week that it's actually one of the biggest threats to our national security. How do we get spending and the debt and the deficit so out of control here?
First, we need more growth in our economy. I think that is what the Tax Cut and Jobs Act does. If you have 3.5% growth, which is what we had between World War II and 2007 on average every year, we can grow our way substantially out of a lot of problems. I wrote an editorial to this effect in the Wall Street Journal a couple of years ago. You just do the math. If we grow at 3.5%, that growth takes care of a multitude of problems, and we've grown at 3.5% on average since World War II. Under both Reagan and Clinton with the Republican Congress, we achieved that. So it's not just distant history, it is recent history. That's the kind of growth we have. We can already see growth picking up under the Trump administration. It just needs to continue, and I think the Tax Cut and Jobs Act helps it do so.
Mm-hmm. Again, folks, this is Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana. Senator, two more questions. Immigration, where are we? It seems like we've sort of lost our way on immigration reform. What can America expect next from Congress?
I think there has to be a serious look at if folks really want increased border security. The reality is, to get increased border security, we are going to need some votes from Democrats in the Senate, and they're going to have to get something in return. I'm all about increasing border security. We need to stop human trafficking, money laundering, drug trafficking across that border. And a physical wall and a virtual wall is how we get there, and that will take more money than we're currently spending.
Mm-hmm.
Democrats will need something in return. Once Democrats are serious and Republicans are serious, we can get it done, but we need a certain seriousness about it.
Right. So last question, Senator. The midterm elections, of course, are coming up this year, and they're extraordinarily important. What's your message for people walking into the elections this year? What's your message to those out there who want to see more Republicans in office?
Are you better off in 2018 than you were 4 years earlier? Is your paycheck bigger? Are you paying fewer taxes? Is the economy growing? Are companies competing for your labor and paying you more and giving you better benefits? If they are, then you should vote Republican, because that happened under the Republican watch. And frankly, I think for the majority of Americans, the answer will be yes. And that's what we need to vote on.
All right, Senator, thank you so much for joining us on Breitbart News Saturday. We hope to have you back.